All right, so we're back again at Core Connections Pilates. I'm Dr. Renee with Intun ChiroCare.
I'm Kayla Shutter at Core Connection Pilates.
So if you haven't noticed, these are totally unscripted videos, but that's kind of how we like it. So we're back with a ChiroCore series, and today we're going to talk about something that I see on film with probably 80% of the women that come into my office. And what it is, it's basically pelvic rotation. So unless you're pregnant or a small child, I take x-rays on almost everybody because x-rays are really like a roadmap of how I'm going to treat a patient, and it really helps me see what's going on internally. So what I see on film, and I'm going to exaggerate it now is just so you get an idea, is pelvic rotation. Most women are stuck either with a forward right pelvis or a forward left pelvis. This is kind of a continuation of the footwork because it can be for a number of reasons. It can be from a short leg, which most people have. It can be from a eversion issue with your foot. It can come from so many things.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is it creates an unbalance in your pelvis, in your core, and in your glutes. Probably most in the glutes is from what I recognize. When there's an imbalance and there's a strong rotation, it creates a tight piriformis muscle, which is the leading cause of sciatic nerve pain. So with it not getting addressed chiropractically and strengthened core-wise, it really creates a problem down the road. So what we're going to focus on today is kind of like how Kayla mentions, is finding that neutral and strengthening for a neutral pelvis.
Yes.
And if you've watched a couple of these videos, you realize like everything is really connected. Mm-hmm. And so like dive into these videos and like start working on your feet and then add a pelvis and then add upper body and stuff like that, because it is all connected and it does all intertwine. However, for the sake of these videos being shorter, we're just going to dive into the pelvis and neutral pelvis, a shortened version of neutral pelvis today. So
yeah,
I'll let you take over now.
Yeah. So this is another like very foundational thing we use in Pilates is finding neutral versus an imprinted spine or tipped or tucked pelvis. So we look at all the ways that can go wrong in pelvic placement. But yes, we're going to start with all fours and kind of look at from a side view what we can see as we set up. So hands are going to be right underneath the shoulders. Knees are about hip distance right underneath your ASIS. Yeah.
Scoot up just so
that works. Yeah. And from right here, I mean, it's hard to tell if she's in any imbalances because she's pretty set up in a nice stacked position. But once we start moving is usually when we can see when these imbalances occur. So I'm going to have her just extend her left foot back on the table and lift it in line with your hip. And she did pretty good right there. I think she wanted to tip, and she fixed it really, really well. And bring that leg back in and go with your right leg and extend it back. And bring it in. Okay, so now I want you to do a really bad version. Okay. So take one leg back. Okay, so this will be really bad, right? We can see that one hip is much higher. She's shifting her weight over her right side. And then from the other angle, you would see that she's opening this hip up towards the front. Yep. So what happens is if we lift the leg too high, we either shift too far, yes, and we start to open. So I'm going to have you go to your left side, and she's doing a really great job. So what I would look for is that her hips are still over her center. Yes, and she lowered her leg a little bit, which is common because it's not about how high you can lift your leg, and you can bring it down. But when you're in it, you want to try to keep the pelvis neutral. And everyone wants to go for that range right away and see how high they can lift their leg. And really, that's not what we're looking for in Pilates. We're trying to maintain the core, right? Coming back to all of that. But when you're extending the leg away, we don't care about how high the leg goes. We're trying to pay attention and notice if the pelvis is neutral. And this is amazing, right? So now if she were to lift higher, she would have to work a lot harder on her glutes and her hamstrings and strengthen that area versus tipping into her back or shifting her weight to the other leg. And then you can come on down and just sit back and roll up those wrists a little bit. Yeah, it's a long time up there. So that's just one way that we would try to find neutral is I think as a mover, we always want to go that like extra mile and lift our leg extra high, and sometimes that is compensating the stability that we are trying to achieve. We forget the sense of stability and what the rest of the body is doing by just trying to move the leg as high as possible. So finding neutral can be a challenge, and it takes sometimes a little bit of evaluation, because we want to think that we can do these really big grand things, but we can eventually. It's just we have to build up and find that strength and the flexibility together. It's not one or the other. It's a balance between strength and flexibility.
I heard a really great quote today that makes this, it's practice is progress, not perfection. And I think with something like pelvic instability, you have to find your balance and where you lift up in order to perfect it. You have to be aware of where the weakness is. And I would say everybody in my practice has a weak side.
Yes.
And it's usually because of not just a structural, but postural. Like what your job is, what you're doing day to day, and that daily posture creates these imbalances as well.
Yeah, and you have people that work. Sometimes I have people that come and do factory jobs, and so they're doing the same. I mean, you also work the same leg all day long, and yes, our bodies build up those strengths to do the job, and that's what But we're not machines, and sometimes we have to take time to bring ourselves back to a neutral placement, which is hard, and it's hard to feel and sense when we're so used to working in that certain position all day or whatever it might be. So
yeah, I would suggest bird dog is the exercise we just do. I call bird dog, and it's something that I recommend people to do, but you almost have to have a mirror in front of you looking at it to see like the shift from side to side and what leg is higher and stuff like that. And that's the benefit of like obviously having someone like you as well. So
yeah, and it takes a long time to feel, and like it's amazing when my clients are like, oh my god, I feel my hamstrings, or like, oh my god, I feel my glutes, or I feel my abs engaged, because it's like it takes time to find those muscle groups and to figure out what that actually means. Like you can probably see it very clear on Renee, or on another body, but when you start to do it yourself, it's really, really hard to sense and feel. So that's why it's like, don't judge it, just do it and do the best you can, and over time it starts to become more natural. For sure. So should we show an advanced version? Sure, yeah. And actually we're gonna do this on the reformer, so we'll take a break and readjust.
All right, perfect.
Cool. All right, so here we have Renee set up in elephant. Again, we're still focusing on pelvic placement. So I'm going to take my foot off, which is going to allow her to move her legs. And what you're seeing here, and once you're in, I'm going to actually have you shift your hips back a little bit more. Yes, okay. So she's keeping her back nice and flat. Her arms aren't doing anything. They're just holding her upper body up into a placement. And her legs are what's working. And she's basically hinging at her hips and pressing away. And we want to make sure that both feet are working evenly, that she's not favoring one, or that the pelvis is tipping or dropping as she's pressing away. And I'm going to have her pause what she's in, and she's going to go into a rounded spine. Yes. And she's going to continue working. So we're getting at another placement of the back, which we'll get probably into at another time, rounded back versus flat back. But it works the abdominals differently. And right now she's also strengthening her hamstrings and stretching down into the calves and the heels. So it's a strengthening exercise and a really good stretch. And when you're ready, you can come on down and take a break. So going back to pelvic placement and the importance of strengthening both sides evenly. This is a nice one, and with the equipment, it gets us into a position where we have feedback. So we can get both feet pressing evenly. We get the feedback of our abdominals and how we can maintain that support without feeling like we're gonna slide all the way back. So it's a great combination of stretching and strengthening. And I'm just gonna show one more advanced exercise, which is a combination. And actually, I'm going to do different than what you were doing, a little bit different than what you were doing, but very similar with the heels lifted. So again, I'm still keeping the contact of both feet in that position. As I press back, I'm going to bend one leg and press one leg back. So before we were showing on the trap table bird dog. So this is going to be another idea of it. And I can't see myself in the mirror, so I don't even know if I'm truly in my neutral pelvis.
And you are.
But when I'm extending back, I am trying to really keep my hips square. And I'll show that from this side as well. So,
and I know that we talk about core and pelvic, but you know, you brought a good point. Hamstrings are huge role play in non-neutral pelvis, because if your hamstrings are tight, it literally rocks your pelvis back. So strengthening and stretching your hamstrings is super important.
Yeah.
And again, it just shows everything is connected. We can't just isolate one thing and talk about,
So kind of going off of what we were showing before and talking about with the bird dog is the equipment does give some really good feedback. And it's all connected. I mean, I feel everything working. It's hard to say, oh, I'm just working on pelvic placement when I feel my hamstrings and my core and my arms. I mean, my arms are holding up my upper body, so it becomes a full body exercise. And that's what's so great about Pilates is one of the principles is integration. So like you can't not work everything or be aware of everything, because that's the only way we can isolate is if something's mobilizing, something else is stabilizing. And it's always this balance between those two. If something is stretching, something else is strengthening. Which is why I think it's so great in the Pilates practice, because I don't know, there's not a lot of practices that kind of have that really good balance between the two.
And I think that's why I just love the connection between chiropractic and Pilates so much, because you know, my job is to structurally get the spine back into alignment, but because of the muscle memory, there's always a weak side and a strong side when we're talking about spinal anatomy. And that's where Pilates, because it's the strengthening and the stretching and the same movements that really make the biggest impact. So, so again, this was just kind of showing the basics, basics to advance of what you can do to strengthen and stretch for anybody that is struggling with any pelvic, basically posture issues, which from my experience is probably 80% of the people. You might not be feeling pain or symptoms now, but prevention is huge. So hopefully you take this information, you can start incorporating some things at home. And then if you're interested in doing anything more, you know, reach out to Kayla for Core Connections, or if you're interested in chiropractic, reach out to me. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.